The first time Zuri Okoye realized Kang Min-jae had found a new way to hurt her, it wasn't in a courtroom. It was at Incheon Airport. She had her baby strapped to her chest, his tiny body warm through the carrier, his breath soft against her collarbone. Her passport was in her hand. The boarding pass was in her pocket. She could already taste the relief of distance, hours of flying. Then a different sky, a different set of rules, a place where the Kang name wouldn't make strangers flinch. She stepped forward when her row was called, and a uniformed officer stepped into her path. "Ma'am," he said, voice polite, practiced. "Please come with us." Zuri's stomach dropped so fast it felt like her body forgot how to stand. "I'm just boarding," she managed, forcing her face to stay calm because panic was contagious and her baby could feel everything. The officer's eyes flicked to the child, then back to her. "There's a flag on the minor's travel. We need to verify documentation." Zuri's mouth went dry. "What flag?" A second officer appeared, not aggressive, just inevitable. "A custody-related alert," he said. "It won't take long." Zuri's heart began to pound in her ears, loud enough to drown out airport announcements. She tightened her arms around her baby, instinctively curling over him like a shield. Somewhere behind her, people kept moving. Rolling suitcases, quiet laughter, a family taking selfies. Life continuing, indifferent to the way her world was tilting. The officer gestured again. "This way, please." Zuri took one step, and in the glossy reflection of the terminal glass, she saw a man watching from a distance. Charcoal suit, perfect hair, posture like ownership. Kang Min-jae. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't even smiling. He was simply there, as if he'd ordered the airport to hold her in place until he arrived. Zuri's breath caught, because she understood in that frozen second, Min-jae hadn't come to negotiate. He'd come to collect. And the scariest part was how calm he looked, like the outcome had already been decided. That moment, airport lights, officers' polite hands, Min-jae's unreadable stare, hadn't come out of nowhere. It was the end of a chain Zuri didn't even realize he'd started building the day she disappeared from the hospital service exit. After the court's temporary ruling, Zuri tried to breathe again. She had moved into a modest place under tight privacy, the kind of home that felt ordinary enough to be invisible. She learned her new routine like a survival skill. Feed the baby, rest in fragments, document everything, keep her location tight, never post anything in real time, never answer unknown numbers, never walk without looking behind her. Choi Seo-yeon, her lawyer, made it clear that temporary, in court language, meant fragile. "You have custody for now," Seo-yeon told her, eyes sharp. "But Min-jae is not the kind of man who accepts for now. He will attack you from the side." Zuri had asked quietly, "From where?" Seo-yeon answered without hesitation. "Immigration, media, money, influence. He'll try to make you look like a criminal instead of a mother." Zuri had smiled grimly at that, because the truth was, Min-jae had always tried to make her feel criminal for wanting basic things. Friends, work, choices, air. Abina, her older friend from the African community, kept showing up with food and calm. Not soft calm, warrior calm. "Let him bark," Abina said one evening while bouncing the baby. "A man who is losing always gets louder." Zuri wanted to believe that. She did. But she also knew Min-jae didn't just bark. He bought teeth. Min-jae's first move wasn't to come after Zuri directly. It was to come after her story. He had his PR team shift tone. No longer postpartum confusion, but international manipulation. He fed whispers into the right mouths. Zuri was planning to flee Korea with the baby. Zuri had foreign backers. Zuri was stealing an heir. Madame Kang, his mother, did her part too, planting poison in social circles, the kind of poison that sounded like concern. Poor Abina's face was hard. "Either way, we move." Seo-yeon hesitated for the first time. Not because she didn't agree, but because she understood what move meant now. Another new address, another reset, another chunk of Zuri's life turned into a suitcase. Zuri nodded anyway. "We move." That night, while her baby slept, Zuri packed with shaking hands. Not because she was unsure, but because her body still remembered the hospital bed, the folder, the signature line. Her body remembered how small she had felt, but she also remembered what she had become after. A woman who could disappear. A woman who could adapt. A woman who could survive. By morning, She was gone again. Min-jae was unraveling behind his calm. He had expected Zuri to get tired. He had expected her to come crawling back when money tightened or loneliness hit. Instead, she kept slipping out of reach, quietly, efficiently, without drama. It made him feel mocked. And Min-jae did not forgive mockery. Madame Kang sat across from him in the penthouse, tea untouched, eyes sharp as blades. "You are letting her lead," she said. Min-jae's voice was flat. "I'm not." Madame Kang leaned forward. "You are reacting. She moves, you chase. A Kang man does not chase." Min-jae's jaw tightened. "Then tell me what you want." Madame Kang smiled faintly. It wasn't warmth. It was calculation. "I want you to stop thinking like a husband," she said, "and start thinking like a family." Min-jae's gaze hardened. "She is my wife." Madame Kang's eyes glittered. "No. She is an outsider with access to our name. That is what she is. And she is turning our heir into her weapon." Min-jae's hand tightened around his cup. Madame Kang's voice softened slightly. The way poison sometimes sounded like advice. "You don't need her to return. You need the child to return." Min-jae stared at her. And in that stare, something unspoken passed between them. An agreement older than love, older than marriage. Legacy over everything. Outside the penthouse, Min-jae's head of security, Lee Do-hyun, waited like a shadow. Do-hyun had been loyal for years. Loyal because loyalty kept him paid. Loyal because the Kangs protected their own. But lately, Do-hyun had been watching Min-jae's rage turn sloppy. Watching Madame Kang's involvement deepen. Watching the legal heat rise. And Do-hyun had a talent for reading collapse. Collapse was dangerous for everyone nearby. That's why, on a night when Min-jae was distracted by meetings and PR calls, Do-hyun did something that could ruin him. He sent an anonymous message. Not to Zuri directly, too traceable. To Seo-yeon. It arrived on a secure channel Seo-yeon only used for sensitive cases. One line. He's not trying to win in court. He's trying to trap her at the airport. Seo-yeon read it twice, then sat very still. Zuri watched her lawyer's face and felt fear bloom. "What?" Zuri asked softly. Seo-yeon's eyes lifted. "We're running out of safe options." Zuri's pulse hammered. "What does that mean?" Seo-yeon exhaled slowly. "It means we need to decide whether staying in Korea is still survivable." Zuri's throat tightened. "He can stop me from leaving." Seo-yeon nodded. "Yes, that's what the airport trap is." Abina's voice was sharp from the corner. "Then we don't go through the front door." Zuri turned. "What does that mean?" Abina's expression didn't change. "It means we get smarter." For the first time in weeks, Zuri felt something other than fear. Anger. Because it was one thing to fight for custody. It was another for a man to try to turn the entire country into his private lock. Zuri whispered, "I want him to pay." Seo-yeon's gaze was steady. "Then we don't just defend. We attack." They attacked in the only way that mattered with men like Min-jae, evidence. Seo-yeon began digging into the hospital where Zuri had delivered, deeper than before. Not just the discharge documentation. Not just the staff statements. The actual administrative trail. Who authorized the VIP room access list? Who approved the lawyer and security entering Zuri's recovery room? Who had been contacted after Zuri disappeared? And, most importantly, who handled the newborn's birth registration paperwork? Because in Korea, birth registration and parental listing weren't just formalities. They were leverage. A week into that deep dive, Seo-yeon came to Zuri with a face that looked too controlled. Zuri recognized that look. It was the look Seo-yeon wore when a truth was so sharp it had to be handled carefully. "What is it?" Zuri asked, voice quiet. Seo-yeon sat down. "There are inconsistencies." Zuri's stomach tightened. "What kind?" Seo-yeon slid a folder onto the table. Inside were copies, stamps, dates, and a chain of signatures. "I requested records related to the baby's documentation," Seo-yeon said. "The hospital logged a guardian consent form that you did not sign." Zuri stared. "That's impossible." Seo-yeon's eyes didn't blink. "It's not impossible if someone signed for you." Zuri's skin prickled. "Who?" Seo-yeon's voice stayed level. "A staff member's signature appears on your line. And the approval came from a Kang-affiliated liaison." Abina swore under her breath. Zuri's hands went numb. "What does that consent do?" Seo-yeon's jaw tightened. "It authorizes certain administrative actions, like expedited registration steps, guardianship processing. It's not the same as custody, but it's the kind of paperwork people use to build a story." Zuri's voice shook. "A story that I'm not the mother?" Seo-yun shook her head once. No, you gave birth. That's documented. But a story that you are optional. Zuri swallowed hard, her mind spinning. Optional. Like a helper. Like a carrier. Like a temporary role. She looked down at her baby, sleeping against her, and felt a surge of rage so hot it made her vision blur. Min-jae had forced her to sign away her future. Now he was trying to erase her present. Seo-yun continued. There's more. Someone requested a copy of the baby's medical identification band records. Twice. Zuri's throat tightened. Why would they? Seo-yun's gaze sharpened. Because if you can't physically take the baby yet, you prepare everything else. You prepare the paper world. So when you do take him, it looks like you're restoring order, not stealing. Zuri's chest squeezed. He's going to take my child. Abina leaned forward, voice hard. He will try. Seo-yun nodded. And that's why we have to move before the airport flag becomes a full exit ban. Zuri's mouth went dry. How do we leave if the airport is a trap? Seo-yun paused. We might not leave. Zuri stared at her. Then what? Seo-yun's voice dropped slightly. Then we make sure the trap catches him too. What followed wasn't one big dramatic move. It was a series of small, precise actions, like threading a needle in the dark. Seo-yun contacted a journalist again, not to publish immediately, but to set up a sealed evidence transfer in case something happened to Zuri. Abina arranged quiet support, trusted people who could show up fast, who could witness, who could record, who could make noise if Min-jae tried to do something off-script. Zuri went to her embassy under a different name on the appointment, escorted discreetly. She didn't ask for rescue. She asked for documentation support, proof of identity, proof of motherhood, proof of her legal right to exist. The embassy official looked at the papers and sighed like a person who had seen this story before and hated that it kept repeating. You are not the first, the official said softly. Zuri's voice was almost a whisper. I don't want to be the one who loses. The official's eyes were kind, but tired. Then don't travel without iron paperwork. Not in a fight like this. Zuri nodded. He's setting an airport trap. The official's face tightened. Yes, that's common. The system is clean on the surface, but names like Kang can dirty it quietly. Zuri left the embassy with copies, stamps, and a new kind of fear. Not the fear of Min-jae's anger, but the fear of invisible mechanisms moving against her. Still, she needed an option. She needed a door. And when you need a door, you sometimes choose the one you least want to open. Zuri agreed to a supervised visitation exchange earlier than scheduled. Seo-yun tried to dissuade her. You don't have to. Zuri's eyes were steady. I do. He thinks I'm hiding forever. I need him to think I'm tired. Abina's mouth tightened. You're baiting him. Zuri nodded once. Yes. The visitation center was clean, neutral, built for the illusion of calm. Cameras in corners. Soft chairs. Toys meant to make everything look humane. Min-jae arrived with his lawyers and that same controlled face, like he was practicing being a victim. When Zuri walked in holding the baby, Min-jae's eyes flickered, just once. Possession. He moved closer, then stopped when the supervisor lifted a hand. Only under supervision. The supervisor said firmly. Min-jae smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. Of course. Zuri handed the baby over gently, her heart hammering as if she were doing something unnatural, giving her child to the man who had tried to trap her. Min-jae held the baby like he belonged there. The baby fussed, sensing tension he couldn't understand. Min-jae cooed softly, performance perfect. Zuri watched, face blank. Then Min-jae lifted his gaze to hers. You look tired, he said quietly in Korean. Zuri answered in the same low tone. Newborns do that. Min-jae's lips curved. Come home. Zuri's face didn't change. No. Something cold flashed in his eyes. You will lose. Zuri tilted her head slightly. Will I? Min-jae's voice dropped. You can't run forever. Zuri's reply was soft, almost gentle. I'm not running. Min-jae's eyes narrowed. Then what are you doing? Zuri leaned closer. Just enough that the supervisor couldn't hear her words. Just enough that Min-jae would remember this later. I'm learning, she whispered. How men like you fall. Min-jae's jaw tightened. For the first time in a long time, Zuri saw it, the crack in his calm, the fear of losing control, and she knew her words had landed. Right then, at the exact moment Min-jae's face tightened, the building's fire alarm went off. Not a gentle beep. A full, sharp alarm. People froze. The supervisor's eyes widened. then snapped into protocol. Everyone stay calm, she ordered, moving quickly toward the hallway. A staff member rushed in. We have to evacuate this wing. Zuri's blood turned to ice. Because the timing was too perfect, Min-jae took one step back, clutching the baby tighter. Zuri lunged forward instinctively. Give him. The supervisor blocked her. Madam, follow procedure. Min-jae's lawyer stepped into the chaos, body angled like a shield. And for 2 seconds, in the noise and confusion, Zuri lost clear sight of her child. Just 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds, Zuri felt something rip through her, pure animal terror. Then she saw him again. Min-jae holding the baby, moving toward the exit with the crowd. Relief hit, and immediately turned into suspicion. Because Min-jae wasn't moving like a man being evacuated. He was moving like a man executing a plan. Zuri shoved past the supervisor. My baby. The supervisor grabbed her arm. Madam, stop. You're making it worse. Zuri's voice broke through the alarm. That man will take my child. Min-jae turned his head slightly, eyes flat. And Zuri saw it clearly now. He wanted her to look hysterical. He wanted the room to remember her yelling, not his movement. Zuri forced herself to breathe. She lowered her voice, painfully, into control. Supervisor, she said tightly, watch his hands. Watch where he goes. He's using the alarm. The supervisor hesitated. That hesitation saved everything. Because the supervisor didn't chase Zuri. She chased Min-jae's path with her eyes. And she saw Min-jae's head of security, Do-hyun, waiting near a side corridor that didn't lead to the main exit. Not panicked. Positioned. The supervisor's face changed. Stop. The supervisor snapped, voice suddenly loud with authority. Mr. Kang, this way is not authorized. Min-jae paused. His eyes flicked to Do-hyun. Do-hyun's face remained blank, but something in his posture shifted, like a man realizing this attempt had too many witnesses. The supervisor moved closer, firm. Bring the child back into the supervised room. Now. Min-jae's smile returned, thin and sharp. You're overreacting. Zuri stepped forward, voice controlled but deadly. Give me my son. For a second, everything was still, alarms screaming, people moving, but the space between them tightened into a quiet war. Then Min-jae handed the baby back. Slowly, deliberately, like he was showing the room he could choose restraint. Zuri took her child and felt her legs threaten to collapse with relief. Min-jae leaned in as if to whisper something poisonous. And before he could, a security officer from the building appeared, speaking urgently into a radio. False alarm, the officer said. System test error. Evacuation canceled. A false alarm. Zuri stared. Min-jae's eyes didn't change, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Because now Zuri knew. Now the supervisor knew. Now there was a record of a suspicious coincidence. Seo-yeon arrived minutes later, furious, and demanded incident reports, camera footage, everything. Min-jae's lawyers tried to smooth it over. It was a misunderstanding, they said. Zuri didn't argue. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She left with her baby and a new certainty. Min-jae was done pretending. He was going to take the child the moment he found a clean way to do it. Or a way that looked clean. That night, Seo-yeon listened to Zuri's account, then sat very still. Airport, Seo-yeon said finally. He's escalating to travel restrictions because direct snatching risks scandal. He'll try to make you unable to move, unable to breathe. Zuri stared at the wall. Then I should leave before he locks it. Seo-yeon's eyes narrowed. Yes, but leaving through the obvious door is exactly what he's waiting for. Abina's voice cut in. Sometimes you walk into the trap when you know where the trap is. Zuri turned slowly. You're saying I should go to the airport anyway. Abina nodded. I'm saying, if he wants a public trap, then we make it public, on our terms. Zuri's heart pounded, because it was terrifying, but it was also smart. If Min-jae wanted her caught quietly, she would be caught loudly. If you're watching this and you can already feel what's coming, don't blink now. Subscribe to Afro-K Ruthless Love Stories, because this is the part where the plan turns dangerous. Hit like so the algorithm keeps this story alive, and comment right now. Would you risk walking into the airport trap, or would you disappear another way? And after this video, go watch the other stories on Afro-K Ruthless Love Stories, because every one of them is built to twist when you least expect it. They prepared like it was a mission. Zuri gathered every document. Birth records, hospital discharge notes, Court orders, embassy letters, notarized translations. Seo-yun contacted the journalist and arranged for a camera crew to be nearby without being obvious, close enough to capture wrongdoing, far enough to avoid obstructing. Abina organized 2 trusted community witnesses who could show up as friends seeing her off. Phones ready, eyes open. And then there was the strangest part. Do Hyun, Min-jae's security chief, sent a second anonymous message to Seo-yun. He will appear at the airport. He wants you detained first. He wants you to panic. Seo-yun stared at the message, then looked at Zuri with a face that said, "This is worse than we thought." Zuri's voice was quiet. "He's going to watch me get stopped." Seo-yun nodded. "Yes." Zuri adjusted her baby's carrier straps and felt a cold calm settle in her chest. "Then let him watch," she said. They went early, before the terminal got too crowded, before too many variables could slip in. Zuri walked with her baby held close, face composed, posture controlled. Seo-yun walked beside her, calm and sharp, like a blade wearing a suit. Abina trailed a few steps behind, eyes scanning. At the check-in counter, everything seemed normal for 2 minutes. Then the flag hit. The same polite officer. The same practiced calm. "Ma'am," he said, "please come with us." Zuri felt the moment try to swallow her, that instinct to shrink, to plead. She didn't. She lifted her chin. "On what basis?" The officer gestured. "A custody-related alert. We need to verify." Seo-yun stepped forward. "We will verify right here. Present the order. Present the authority. Present the exact request." The officer hesitated, eyes flicking to his supervisor. Zuri's baby made a small sound against her chest. And Zuri felt the rage rise. Not loud rage, not messy rage. Clean rage. The rage of a mother who knew she was being played with. Then she saw him again, just as she had in the terminal reflection before. Min-jae, watching from a distance, perfectly composed. He wasn't alone. Madame Kang stood beside him. And when Zuri saw Madame Kang's face, her stomach turned. Because Madame Kang was smiling. Not a public smile. A private one. Like she already knew something Zuri didn't. Zuri's skin prickled. "Seo-yun," she whispered without moving her lips. "His mother is here." Seo-yun's eyes flicked. "I see her." The officers guided them to a small room off to the side. Not a cell. Not openly hostile. Just a room designed to make you feel small while still looking professional. Inside, Zuri sat with her baby, fingers locked around the carrier straps. Seo-yun stood, arms crossed, eyes on the officers. An airport supervisor entered with a file. "We received a request to verify the minor's travel eligibility," the supervisor said carefully. Seo-yun's voice was crisp. "From whom?" The supervisor hesitated. "A family representative." Seo-yun leaned forward slightly. "Name the representative." The supervisor swallowed. "Kang Min-jae." Zuri's throat tightened. Seo-yun didn't blink. "And the grounds." The supervisor looked uncomfortable. "Concerns of international flight and custodial interference." Seo-yun's voice sharpened. "There is a court order granting the mother physical custody and allowing travel unless restricted by a specific judge's order. Do you have that order?" The supervisor hesitated too long. Then, quietly, "There is an emergency motion pending." Seo-yun's eyes narrowed. "Pending is not granted." The supervisor cleared his throat. "We also have another request." Zuri's stomach sank further. "What request?" The supervisor opened the file and glanced down like he didn't want to say it. "A paternity verification request," he said. Zuri froze. "What?" Seo-yun's head snapped up. "On what grounds?" The supervisor spoke carefully. "A claim has been raised that the minor's paternity may be disputed and that the mother may be attempting to leave the country before verification." Zuri's brain went hot. She had never cheated. Never. Her voice shook. "That's a lie." Seo-yun's eyes were sharp. "You cannot detain them on a claim." The supervisor swallowed. "A test has already been processed." Zuri's breath caught. "Already?" The supervisor nodded stiffly. "Results were expedited." Zuri stared, mind spinning. "How? When? From what sample?" She felt suddenly nauseated, like the floor had tilted. Seo-yun's voice went low and dangerous. "Bring the documentation of chain of custody. Now." The supervisor stepped out. Zuri turned to Seo-yun, voice shaking. "This is impossible. They can't." Seo-yun's jaw tightened. Powerful families do impossible things all the time. The question is how sloppy they were. Zuri's baby shifted, fussing softly. Zuri pressed a kiss to his head, whispering, "I'm here. I'm here." Then the door opened again. But it wasn't the supervisor who entered first. It was Madame Kang. She walked in like she owned the room. Expensive coat draped perfectly, eyes calm, smile faint. Min-jae followed 2 steps behind, expression controlled, gaze fixed on the baby like the baby was an object that had been misplaced. Seo-yun moved instantly, stepping between them and Zuri. "You are not authorized to be in here." Madame Kang's smile widened slightly. "Oh, Attorney Choi," she said softly. "Always dramatic." Zuri's voice came out low. "Get away from my child." Madame Kang's eyes drifted to Zuri, taking her in as if she were assessing a product. "You should have stayed quiet," she said, almost kindly. "Quiet wives live easier." Zuri's hands clenched. "I'm not your wife." Madame Kang's smile didn't fade. "No," she agreed. "You were never truly ours." Zuri's blood ran cold at the wording. Min-jae's voice was flat. "Zuri, end this. Come home." Zuri laughed once, sharp and bitter. "Home? You mean your cage?" Min-jae's eyes hardened. "You brought this on yourself." Seo-yun's voice cut in. "If you have an order, present it. If you don't, leave." Madame Kang tilted her head, as if amused by the idea of being told no. Then the supervisor re-entered with papers in trembling hands. He cleared his throat. "The paternity verification." Seo-yun snapped. "Chain of custody." The supervisor held out the document. Seo-yun scanned, eyes narrowing, jaw tightening with every line. Then she looked up, expression unreadable. Zuri's heart slammed against her ribs. "What does it say?" Seo-yun's lips parted, then closed, like she was choosing words that wouldn't detonate the room too early. "Zuri," Seo-yun said quietly. "The result claims the child is not biologically related to Kang Min-jae." Zuri went perfectly still. No air, no sound, no thought. Then her mind screamed, wordless. "That's not possible," Zuri whispered, voice cracking. "It's not possible." Because she knew what she had lived. She knew what she had done and not done. She knew the truth of her own body. And if Min-jae wasn't the father, then only 2 realities existed, both horrifying. Either the test was fabricated, or the baby she held. Zuri's arms tightened reflexively around her child, as if someone might snatch him through a sentence. Madame Kang's smile turned into something colder, something satisfied. Min-jae's face flickered, just for a heartbeat, with something that looked like shock. Like he hadn't expected that. Like he thought this was going to be a clean win. Seo-yun's eyes sharpened as she watched Min-jae's reaction. And Zuri saw it too. Min-jae looked blindsided, which meant he might not have known. Zuri's voice trembled, rage and terror colliding. "What did you do?" Madame Kang stepped closer, voice soft as silk. "Oh dear," she murmured. "Now you're finally asking the right question." Zuri's whole body went cold. Because that wasn't an answer. That was a doorway. And Madame Kang was standing beside it, ready to push. Min-jae's jaw tightened. "Mother." Madame Kang lifted a hand, silencing him like he was a child. Then she looked at Zuri, eyes gleaming with a secret. "You disappeared without a word," Madame Kang said gently. "Now you will learn what disappears when a family decides it's necessary." Zuri's throat closed. Seo-yun took a step forward, voice like a blade. "If you tampered with hospital records, if you falsified." Madame Kang smiled wider. "Attorney Choi," she said softly, "you should be careful. Some truths don't just ruin reputations." Zuri's baby fussed again, sensing her shaking. Zuri clutched him, trembling now, not from weakness but from the scale of what was unfolding. If Min-jae truly didn't know, then Madame Kang had been moving pieces alone, or with people Min-jae trusted. If the test was real, it meant something far worse than custody. It meant conspiracy. And Zuri suddenly understood why Madame Kang had smiled at the airport. Because this wasn't just about taking the baby. It was about breaking Zuri so completely she wouldn't even know what she was fighting for anymore. Seo-yun's phone buzzed in her pocket. One sharp vibration, then another, then another. She glanced down once, and her face tightened. Zuri whispered, "What is it?" Seo-yun lifted her eyes slowly. "The court just issued an emergency hold," she said, voice controlled. "Temporary, until this paternity dispute is resolved." Zuri's chest seized. "So I can't leave." Seo-yun's voice dropped. "And they're requesting the child be placed in protective custody, pending verification." Zuri's scream didn't come out as sound. It came out as a look. a look that turned Abina's calm into fury. Madame Kang's smile remained. Min-jae stared at the papers like the ground had shifted under him. And Zuri, holding her baby tighter than she'd ever held anything in her life, realized the real twist wasn't the test. The real twist was this. If the baby wasn't Min-jae's, then someone had been controlling the most intimate truth of her life from the beginning. And whoever that person was, wasn't finished. Madame Kang leaned in just slightly, close enough that only Zuri would hear the next words. "Beg if you want," she whispered. "Or fight. Either way, part 3 will be unforgettable." And the supervisor reached for the phone, preparing to call the family services unit. The supervisor's hand hovered over the phone like the call was already decided. Zuri's arms locked tighter around her baby, not gently now, firm, protective, primal. The child stirred, sensing the change in her body, sensing the danger even without understanding it. Seo-yeon stepped forward so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Nobody is taking that child anywhere," she said, voice controlled but sharp. "Not without a signed court order in my hand, not without chain of custody proof, and not while I'm standing here." The supervisor swallowed. "Attorney Choi, I'm under instruction." "From who?" Seo-yeon snapped. "From the court, or from a family name?" Madame Kang's smile didn't move. She didn't look nervous. She looked entertained, like watching people argue over a door she already had the key for. Min-jae's face stayed still, but his eyes weren't on Zuri anymore. They were locked on the papers, locked on the words that claimed the baby wasn't his. For the first time, Zuri saw something in him that didn't look like control. It looked like doubt, a crack. And Zuri realized, with eyes spreading in her chest, that Min-jae might not have known about this test at all, which meant someone else had done it, which meant someone else had access. Access to the hospital, access to records, access to her child's identity. Madame Kang leaned in, her voice soft enough to be mistaken for kindness. "Zuri," she murmured, "you wanted to disappear. Now you will learn what it feels like when the ground disappears under you." Zuri's throat tightened. She forced words out anyway. "You falsified it." Madame Kang's eyes gleamed. "Prove it." Seo-yeon's phone buzzed again, then again, rapid, urgent. She glanced down once and went very, very still. Zuri's pulse spiked. "What?" Seo-yeon lifted her gaze. "An emergency hold just hit the system," she said carefully. "They've flagged the child for protective custody until verification is resolved." Zuri's ears rang. Protective custody, meaning they take him. Abina's voice turned into steel behind her. "Over my dead body." Min-jae finally looked up, straight at his mother. "Mother," he said, low and tight. "What did you do?" Madame Kang didn't even glance at him. She kept her eyes on Zuri, like Min-jae's question was background noise. Then, quietly, too quietly, the lock on the room door clicked again. From the outside. And this time it didn't sound like routine. It sounded like a decision. The supervisor reached for the phone. Zuri shifted her body, turning slightly so her back shielded the baby, eyes scanning the room like an animal cornered in a place that pretended to be polite. Seo-yeon's hand slid into her bag. Abina took one slow step forward. Min-jae's jaw clenched, his stare flicking between Zuri, the baby, and his mother, like he'd just realized the war wasn't where he thought it was. And then Seo-yeon spoke one sentence that made Zuri's blood run cold. "Zuri, check his ankle." Zuri blinked. "What?" Seo-yeon's eyes were locked on the baby carrier, her voice barely a whisper. "I saw it at the hospital," she said. "A band. A tag." Zuri's breath stopped. Her fingers trembled as she lowered her gaze. Down, down, to the baby's tiny ankle beneath the blanket. And there it was. A thin, pale band she hadn't put there. A band with a tiny, printed code. A tracking tag. Zuri's throat opened, but no sound came out. Madame Kang's smile finally widened, pleased like a woman who had waited for applause. Min-jae's eyes widened, real shock now. Abina swore. Seo-yeon's voice went deadly calm. "Now we know how they found you," she said. Zuri stared at the band as if it had claws. Because if her baby had been tagged, then someone had been watching them this whole time. And the only question left was, who else was already waiting outside that locked door? If your heart is racing right now, don't leave me here, because part 3 is where this turns from a custody fight into something nobody saw coming. Subscribe to Afro-K Ruthless Love Stories so you don't miss the next episode. Like this video, so YouTube pushes it to more people. Comment right now. Did Min-jae know about the tracking tag? Or is Madam Kang playing him too? And share this story with a friend who loves ruthless twists. Then go watch the other videos on this channel, because every story on Afro-K Ruthless Love Stories is built to keep you hooked. Because as the supervisor lifted the phone to make the call, Zuri's baby suddenly started crying, sharp, urgent. And from behind the locked door, footsteps approached. Not one pair, several, and the handle began to turn.